it's Mitch from PickDawgz.com, and it is Tuesday, July the 2nd, 2024. Here with today's Major League Baseball first 5 innings picks for all 15 games on today's Major League Baseball card. After Monday's short card, we've got a full loaded card and a full loaded week. And of course, we also do on these videos today in sports history. And today in sports history, pretty cool one. Steve Cawthon won the Irish Derby. He's the only jockey to ever win the Epsom Derby, the French Derby, the Irish Derby, and the Kentucky Derby. He's the only jockey to ever complete that. I know if you don't follow horse racing, you say big deal, but I'll tell you what, if you do follow horse racing, you know it is a huge deal. And I'll tell you what's not a huge deal, though, is beating up on the books, because we're just doing that on a regular basis here. And I'll tell you what, we don't even have to wait for the game to be over, because we just crush them in the first 5 innings. Let's get it started. For our first game of the day, we head to Cleveland, where the Guardians are taking on the White Sox in an AL Central matchup. Carlos Carrasco on the bump for the Guardians. It's Chris Flexen on the mound for the White Sox. We've seen some good innings out of Flexen this season, but for the most part, well, he's starting to get battered. 5.13 ERA on the season, 5.40 over his last 3 starts, while Carrasco, 5.27 ERA on the season, 4.50 over his last 3 starts. Carrasco will probably never regain the form that he once had, his first time around with the Guardians, or the Cleveland team, whatever you want to call it, whatever it is, but we all know what it was. And the thing is, that Cleveland is 9-2 in Carrasco's last 11 starts versus the White Sox, but just 3-8 in Carrasco's last 11 home starts overall. When we look at the way these teams are hitting the baseball, especially versus right-handed pitching, 220 for the Guardians to 214 versus the White Sox, looking at their last 10 games. I think this one is splitting hairs, but I got to give the edge to the home team. I'll roll with the Guardians in the first 5. For our next game, we head to Miami, where the Marlins are taking on the Red Sox. Vicente Belloso on the mound for the Marlins, and Cutter Crawford on the mound for the Red Sox. Belloso making his second start, and while he wasn't highly heralded coming into that first one, he was outstanding, going 5 innings, allowing 2 hits and no runs in that outing. Meanwhile, Cutter Crawford for the Red Sox checks in with a 3.54 ERA on the season, 3.95 over his last 3 starts. The Red Sox have been a much better road team than they have been at home, and here they do, going on the road and against the Marlins team that they're 20-8 in their last 28 games against. We look at the way these teams are hitting the baseball, at least recently, versus right-handed pitching. The Marlins checking in at 203 versus righties, while the Red Sox 234. These stats over their last 10 games. For the season, the Marlins are actually hitting better than that 203, though, at 233, while the Red Sox hitting 248 for the season, compared to that 234 recently. I like the way the Red Sox are hitting the baseball, but no one hit Belloso last time. And Crawford, he's looked vulnerable. I'll take a shot with the Marlins at home for the first 5. For our next game, we head to Pittsburgh, where the Pirates are taking on the Cardinals in a National League Central battle. The Pirates, 3 games under 500. The Cardinals, 3 games over 500. But hey, good series here for the Pirates. They could knot that up in a hurry. Mitch Keller on the bump for the Bucks, while it is Kyle Gibson on the mound for the Cards. Gibson has certainly exceeded his career numbers so far this season with a 3.70 ERA, 3.71 over his last 3 starts, while Keller looking like the all-star that he was a season ago, where I pretty much thought he was just the team representative in the all-star game. But really, he's pitched like an all-star in his recent outings. 3.20 ERA on the season, 3.38 over his last 3 starts. Look at the way these teams are hitting right-handed pitching, and as of late, the Pirates just 201 versus righties, while the Cardinals at 251 over their last 10 games. But the thing is, there's a big difference between hitting Mitch Keller and hitting other righties. There's a big difference between hitting Kyle Gibson as well. I think the Pirates have the edge against Gibson. I'll take the Pirates at home in the first 5. For our next game, we head to Washington, where the Nationals take on the Mets. Two of the only 6 teams that didn't have Monday off. The Nationals have played well at home, but in the Mets, they've been playing well wherever they've been playing. The Mets, have been pretty much clubbing the baseball, and while they dropped a few games to Washington over the weekend, they have been on a heater. Sean Manaea on the bump here for the Mets comes in with a 3.89 ERA, 2.30 over his last 3 starts, while DJ Hers for the Nationals 5.48 on the season, 4.85 over his last 3 games. So, certainly we've seen some high moments from him, but overall, he has proved to be pretty hittable. You look at the way these teams are hitting the baseball, and of course, both these pitchers are lefties, and the Mets have been crushing left-handed pitching to the tune of 320 over their last 10 games, while the Nationals just 212 over the last 10. I think that, if you're looking at a full game, there's always something more to it than starting pitching and, hitting versus the starting pitcher's arm. But in these first 5 inning bets, tough to go against the Mets here. We head to New York, to the Bronx, where the Yankees are hosting the Cincinnati Reds. It's Luis Gil on the mound for the Yankees and Graham Ashcraft on the mound for the Reds. Both these pitchers have been struggling mightily of late, and Ashcraft, a 4.54 ERA for the season, up to 8.56 over his last 3 games, while Gil, 3.15 on the season, ballooning to a 10.97 ERA over his last 3 starts. Gil definitely walks a few too many batters for my taste, but he has been able to get his way out of the trouble most of the season until recently. Meanwhile, Ashcraft is just having a rough year all the way around, but the Reds have responded when he has been on the mound, winning 2 of his last 3 starts, despite that massive ERA. We look at the way these teams are hitting right-handed pitching over their last 10 games, 242 for the Yankees to 233 for the Reds. I understand that Gil does have control problems, and the Reds, well, they're free swinging and are going to make some contact, but I just think these Yankee bats up against Ashcraft means bad news for the Reds. I'll take the Yankees in the first 5. For our next game, we head to Toronto, where the Blue Jays are taking on the Astros. Jose Barrios on the mound for the home team Blue Jays, while Spencer Arrighetti on the mound for the Astros. These are 2 of 6 teams that did not have Monday off, so going right back at it today. Barrios has an impressive 3.38 ERA for the season, but that has ballooned to a 5.50 over his last 3 starts, while Arrighetti might not have been ready for the major leagues this season, but with Astros injuries has been forced into action. 5.68 ERA on the season, 7.11 over his last 3 starts. The Astros have been playing some pretty solid baseball, though, getting over 500 for the first time since the first week of the season. Meanwhile, when we look at the way these teams are hitting the baseball against right-handed pitching, which is what they face here, it's the Blue Jays checking in at 243 versus righties, while the Astros at 302 when looking at a subset of their last 10 games. There wasn't a lot of hitting in Monday's contest. I expect there to be plenty more in this one. I'll roll with the Astros, who are just a hotter hand right now for the first 5 innings. For our next game, we head to Atlanta, where the Braves are taking on the Giants. Ronaldo Lopez gets the ball for the Braves, while Hayden Birdsong makes his second start of his career for the Giants. Birdsong was not overly impressive in his first outing, but also it's one of those situations where it's, he's only pitched 4 2/3 innings. So your ERA seems to get inflated that way. It doesn't take much. He's got a 5.79 ERA with just the 1 start. Lopez 1.70 ERA for the season, and while we've continued to wait for some kind of regression, he's only gotten better, 1.12 over his last 3 starts. Look at the way these teams are hitting right-handed pitching, at least recently over their last 10, and the Giants are at 238, while the Braves at 185. So the Giants actually hitting a little bit better. I think, what we've seen from the Giants is when they play against the better teams, they seem to rise to the occasion, while the Braves have been pretty solid in these Tuesday spots, and the Giants have not been great on the road. To me, this is when the Giants seem to be at their best, and I'll take them in the first 5 of this game. For our next game, we head to Minnesota, where the Twins are taking on the Detroit Tigers. Simeon Woods Richardson on the mound for the Twins, and it's Tarek Skubal on the mound for the Tigers. Skubal has been sensational this season with a 2.32 ERA, but over his last 3 starts, ballooning up to a 4.15. Woods Richardson, 3.41 on the season, but over his last 3 starts, 5.28. Woods Richardson does not go deep into games, and you have to believe that the deeper he goes into the season, the less effective he is going to get. While Skubal, he continues to deal, but when he misses, he seems to always pay the price. We look at the way the Twins are hitting against left-handed pitching, and they're absolutely clubbing it to the tune of 372 over their last 10 games, while the Tigers versus right-handed pitching, a dreadful 184. I think, in most other circumstances, you would say, well, Scooble's pretty good here on the road, but against the way these Twins are hitting and the way, the Tigers are hitting righties, I'm going to have to roll with the Twins in the first 5. For our next game, we head to Chicago, where the Cubs are hosting the Phillies. Hayden Wesneski on the mound for the Cubbies, while Michael Mercado gets his first career start for the Philadelphia Phillies. Phillies continue to roll along 55-29 on the season, while the Cubs check in at 39-46. But Mercado, while he's looked good in the minors with a 1.71 ERA, he has a ton of walks. And if you do that in the major leagues, well, generally you will pay the price for that. Wisniewski is more of a bullpen type guy, and he's not going to go deep into this game. He goes 3-4 innings max, usually even less than that. He's got a 3.60 ERA on the season and 3.31 in his last 3 games. We look at the way these teams are hitting right-handed pitching. The Phillies, 291 versus righties over their last 10 games, while the Cubbies at just 223. The Phillies against righties for the season are at 255 to 224 for the Cubs. The Phillies are a really good hitting team, and I think Mercado can, at the very least, keep them in it. I'm going to take the Phillies for the first 5. For our next game, we head to Texas, where the Rangers are taking on the Padres. It's Nate Eovaldi on the bump for the Rangers and Dylan Cease on the mound for the Padres. Cease, for the most part this season, has been pretty solid with an ERA of 3 and change, but as of late, he was getting roughed up something pretty fierce to bring his ERA close to 7 over his last 3 starts. But the thing is, last time out, he was spot on, blanking the Washington Nationals. So even with that, he still has that high ERA over his last 3, but Cease showing that he's probably not done just yet. Meanwhile, we look at, Nate Eovaldi checks in with a 3.45 ERA, 6.19 over his last 3 starts, but he looked pretty good last time as well. We look at the way these teams are hitting righties, and the Padres 302 versus right-handed pitching over their last 10 games, while the Rangers at 215. I think we've seen the Rangers definitely pick up the pace at times, and the bats have certainly improved, but not to the pace that these Padres are hitting it. Almost all of their games are going over, and I think they get it done in this one. I'm going to take the Padres in the first 5. For our next game, we go to Kansas City, where the Royals are taking on the Rays. And, when we look at this Tampa Bay Rays team, certainly 500 baseball team now, and this is what they do. They kind of just continue to gravitate towards 500 when they're below 500, and then once they get there around the All-Star break, well, then we start to see the real Rays. Meanwhile, the Royals check in 8 games over 500, and I think if you had told them that that's where they would be at this point, they would take it. But we've seen, certainly, despite the strong play against the Guardians over the weekend, we've seen some signs of weakness from this Royals team, primarily in the bullpen, though. Not really as much with their starting pitching. We look at Brady Singer, who gets the ball here for the Royals, 3.12 ERA and 2.45 over his last 3 starts, while Zach Littell, 4.17 ERA for the Rays, 7.50 over his last 3 starts. The way these teams hit righties, the Rays significantly better over their last 10 games at 246 to 218 for the Royals. I think the Rays, they kind of know what they're doing as an organization. I think they get over the hump, and I think they beat the Royals, and I think they beat them in the first 5 as well. For our next game, we head to Colorado, where the Rockies are taking on the Brewers. Ryan Feltner gets the ball for the Rockies, while Dallas Keuchel makes his second start as a member of the Brewers. Last time out for Keuchel, he only lasted 4 innings, gave up 8 hits, and now checks in with an 11.25 ERA. Meanwhile, Feltner, 5.82 ERA for the season, 6.11 over his last 3 starts. The Brewers haven't had a lot of luck in Colorado in their recent meetings, but the Rockies, well, they haven't been very good at home either. Hitting up less than 25% in their home games over the last few weeks. We look at the way these teams are hitting the baseball. We look at the way the Rockies hit lefties at 234, while the Brewers hitting righties at 278, and we're just looking at a subset of their last 10 games. The thing is, Keuchel definitely showed signs of being Dallas Keuchel in that first game. Feltner, well, he's been hit pretty hard all season. I expect to see plenty of balls flying around the ballpark. I like the over in the Rockies-Brewers first 5 innings. For our next game, we head to Oakland where the A's are taking on the Anaheim Angels. The Angels certainly playing their best baseball we've seen all season long, while the A's, they continue to struggle, 26 games under 500. Anaheim, the Angels typically struggle in Oakland, going just 2-7 in their last 9 games played there. Jose Soriano on the mound for the Angels, 3.48 for the season ERA, 3.15 over his last 3 games, and he has been very solid. And when you break that down game by game, it's not like where he's had a blow-up game here or there and, has a few shutouts. It's been very, very consistent. Meanwhile, Mitch Spence for the A's, 4.35 ERA on the season, 6.35 over his last 3 starts. Look at the way these teams are hitting the baseball. It's a little deceptive as the A's are 202 versus righties and shows the Angels at just 232 versus righties. But I don't care. I really like the way the Angels are playing right now. I don't like the way the A's are playing. I think this one's easy. We'll take the Angels in the first 5. For our next game, we head to Seattle where the Mariners are taking on the Baltimore Orioles. The Orioles, of course, continue to roll on. Meanwhile, the Mariners, well, while they still sit well above 500, they can hear those footsteps of the Houston Astros, who once again won on Monday. The Mariners come in, 8 games over, but it just doesn't feel all that comfortable. We look at George Kirby, who gets the start here for the Mariners, 3.35 ERA on the season. And when we look at him over his last 3 games, it improves to a 1.42 ERA. The way the Mariners have been hitting the baseball, it has been extremely light. And, we see them hitting just 200 versus right-handed pitching, 198 versus left-handed pitching over their last 10 games, while the Orioles at 269 versus righties and 265 versus lefties. Grayson Rodriguez, who gets the ball here for the Orioles, certainly is susceptible, and he has been hit at times. But I still think that the Orioles bats are the difference makers in this game. I'll take the Orioles in the first 5. For our final game of the night, we head to LA, to Chavez Ravine, where the Dodgers are hosting the Diamondbacks. The Dodgers continue to roll, but they hardly look like a shoo-in for the World Series like many people thought they were earlier this season. The bats have certainly been there, but the pitching, well, maybe not so much, but 25-16 at home this season. Of course, they've had a lot of success against the Diamondbacks over the years, 48-20 in the last 68 meetings of these two teams. Bobby Miller gets the call for the Dodgers. He's got a 6.75 ERA on the season, 7.30 over his last 10 games, while Ryan Nelson on the mound for the D-backs, 5.69 on the season, 4.86 over his last 3 starts. Both these pitchers certainly have had their share of struggles. We look at the way these teams are hitting righties, and while the numbers don't appear to jump off the page the way their numbers do against left-handed pitching, 225 for the D-backs in their last 10 versus righties and 238 for the Dodgers. I think you throw in these pitchers, and I think we see plenty of hitting. I like the over in the Dodgers D-backs as our pick for the first 5 of this one. And that wraps up today's first 5 innings picks for all 15 Major League Baseball games on the card. Of course, if you're looking for my best bets, the games I'm betting today, as well as best bets from the world's best handicappers, head to our website, PickDawgz.com, click on the Premium Picks tab. Use the discount code PICK for 15% off. We also have PickDawgz merch, like the shirt I'm wearing, the hat I'm wearing, and some of the other gear you see me wearing in the videos, and much, much more. Click on the merch tab over at PickDawgz.com as well. I've also provided links in the description for each of those. So, of course, I look forward to doing these videos each and every day, and I'll be back tomorrow as we've got a loaded card this week of Major League Baseball, and of course, just a month away from NFL preseason football. Make it a winning day. Let's crush the books and knock it over the fence together.